Good morning, and welcome to this week's Making Sense of It. I'm Mona Duncan, your moderator, and it's good to have you with us. This is our gift to you. It is the Glasser Institute for Choice Theory, and each week we have one of our staff present a topic of interest with worldwide events as well as just better living and healthier relationships. And today our speaker is Kim Olver, and she is going to be talking about white privilege through the eyes of choice theory. And thank you each for being here, and for those of you that will be watching later. So, Ms. Kim, are you ready?
I am, Mona. Thank you.
So take it away.
All right. Well, let me start by saying who I am and why I want to speak on this topic. So most people listening already know my name is Kim Olver, and you said that, Mona. Back in 2006, I wrote a book with another choice theory practitioner, Sylvester Baugh, on diversity. And the title is Leveraging Diversity at Work. And it really talked a lot about our personal experiences in the world as two people, not a couple, but two people who often traveled together because of work. We did a lot of diversity trainings together, and often would be in a different state, and we'd be traveling together and have many situations arise that just spoke to the issue of race in America. And because I've done a lot of diversity training, I've also had the privilege to be able to talk with people of color and gay and lesbian people and all kinds of people who have been discriminated against and get to hear their stories. And I think for me, I'm not saying it's true for everyone, but for me, I want to listen to those stories and I want to understand better. It's just a driving force I have inside of myself. So I think I can go back to elementary school when I was the kid who would stand up to the bullies. I remember pushing a boy on the ground because he gave my girlfriend a bloody nose, probably sometime around the first grade. And I can remember some big bully picking on my brother. And my brother was kind of a small kid. And I remember getting in between them and telling the bully to pick on me instead. And then I remember in high school, I had a really tall girl in my class. She had to be over 6 foot. And she always walked around slumped over with her head down, holding all of her books in her arms like this. She looked very strange, and bullies liked to pick on her. And one day I saw this kid bump into her on purpose, which was easy to do because she was only looking at her feet. She didn't even know he was there. Bumped into her. She dropped all of her books. And he laughed while she bent over to try to pick them up and thought it was funny. And I remember getting in his face and telling him, quit picking on people. You know, it's just a calling that I've had from an early age. So to say that this is a new behavior for me is kind of crazy. It's been in me from almost the beginning. In college, I would go to gay rights meetings. They had an organization for gay rights, and I would go. Not because I'm gay, not because I was questioning, but because I believe in gay rights. I believe in a world where all of us have the same opportunities. Certainly we won't be treated the same because we have different abilities. So I'm never going to be a basketball player, no matter how hard I try. Well, I might be a neighborhood basketball player, but I'm never going to be a professional basketball player. I don't have those skills. There's things that we all do that make us unique and special. What I've heard a lot recently, because I have been very vocal, specifically on my Facebook page around Black Lives Matter kinds of issues, and I've had a lot of pushback from certain people, and I've had a lot of gratitude from others. And I think it's really important that we listen to the opinions of people who don't agree with us. And so Brian, you've been one of those people that have sent me things to listen to and to read. And I've gotten lots of videos from people and posts from people. And I read and listen to every single one of them. It's been truly exhausting. It takes a lot of my time. And when I hear people of color saying how tired they are of talking about this and how tired they are of trying to help specifically white people understand their experience, I think I know what they're talking about on a very small scale, because I've only been doing it for about 2 months. They've been doing it for their entire lives. So I have some empathy, which brings me to another thing. One of my probably strongest qualities has always been empathy. It serves me well in counseling. I have an ability to be able to put myself in another person's shoes and imagine what life might be like, looking through their eyes, in their skin, walking in their shoes. I can never have a perfect understanding because I'm not them, but it's just something that's been one of my personal skills. We all have skills. That just happens to be one of mine. Some of the people who have been pushing back against what I'm saying are choice theory people. And they use choice theory as a reason to push, saying, well, don't people need to accept the situation they're in and do what they can with what they have? And I said, that is a choice theory principle for sure. I remember the quote Glasser had, things are tough all over. What are you going to do about it? So we're going to talk about that. I want to start from the beginning in terms of looking at the average white person and the average Black person. Now, I know that there's no such thing truly as an average white person and an average Black person, but I want to look at how choice theory applies and how it looks different. Choice theory looks the same, but how the experiences of white and Black people in our country might be different. So I want to start with the 5 basic needs, because when I teach choice theory, that's where I start. So I would say that white people and Black people certainly have the same basic needs. All people have the same basic needs. So in the beginning, we're 100% the same. And we go out into the real world and we're trying to find things that will match the pictures we have in our quality world. Well, we know that the first quality world picture, Glasser put it on the chart, it's so strong in all of us, is our mother. We form a connection with our mother before we're even born. We know our mother's voice, we know our mother's heartbeat, and it's our mother who's been nourishing us in utero. So when we're born, we already have at least one quality world picture, and it doesn't take long before we develop what I think might be our second quality world picture, and that's the behavior of crying, because crying for an infant is very need satisfying. It often alerts the adults around them to get the things that they need to be more in balance. Now, I meant to do this before, but let me do it now. I'm going back to say that what I'm going to present today is only my opinion. I remember a woman from Europe, I don't remember her, I know her well. Her name is Boba Loit. She's the wife of Leon Loit. And she said to me something very early on in my time as executive director of William Glasser International. She said to me, we don't teach choice theory in Europe. And I was shocked and I said, what? But I tried to keep my judgmental, you talk about your scales being out of balance. My scales were totally out of balance when I heard that and said, what do you mean you don't teach choice theory? What do you teach? And she said, we teach our perception of choice theory. And that was a really meaningful statement to me, because it also explains how many of us learn choice theory and we come away with a completely different, we have very, very many similarities in how we perceive it, but we also have differences in how we perceive it. So I'm only sharing my perception. I know that you may have different perceptions, and it's absolutely okay with me that you have different perceptions. My goal in doing this is not to get people to see things my way. I couldn't do that if I wanted to, but it's just to share information that I have developed that I believe to be true. I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong. I've seen some things in my in my promoting Black Lives Matter, I have had some information given to me that I didn't know before. I didn't know who George Soros is. Now I know who he is. I didn't know about his connection to the Black Lives Matters organization, not the movement. And I make a big distinction between those two because I support the movement. I don't support an organization that is being run to exploit Black people. I'm not in favor of that. I support protesters who are doing what they know to do to call attention to the inequities that they see in our system. I do not ever ascribe to anyone who commits violence. I am not saying those people who burn down stores and beat up store owners. I am not saying that's what I support. Nor am I saying that I support white people who have lynched Black people or who have shot Black people in the back. So there's violence on both sides. I am not in favor of any violence whatsoever, just so you know. That is not what I'm saying. So I want to go back to choice theory. So how do we decide what our beliefs and our values are and the things that we put into our quality world? Well, the first thing is the sensory system. We know that. So the sensory system is we have to become aware of things through our five senses in order for it ever to get to our perceptual system. So if you look at white people and you look at Black people and their general upbringings, there are different things that they are exposed to through their senses. I did not have what you would call a wealthy life. There are people that grew up in my town who thought that we were really rich because my father owned a store. He was an entrepreneur. But my father, what I remember in my growing up is there were times when we were flush. We had a lot of money. We were the first person in town to get air conditioning. And I remember times when my mother used to wear a coat, a winter coat that she'd had for 20 years, and she wore shoes with holes in them because she didn't have enough money to buy us new school clothes. She wasn't going to go and buy her own clothes. But the thing that was interesting about my upbringing, while it may have been hard, it certainly wasn't as hard as some white people's upbringing. I wasn't born into poverty. My father had a way of rebuilding his business every time things got tough. He figured out how to make it better. Black people, many, when they look around, they do see some evidence of successful Black people. There are some successful Black people for sure. Mostly the successful Black people that they see, the prominent ones, are people in acting, people in sports, people in music. And so they look at that and they think, well, I could be that. If you talk to Black kids, they're often saying things like, I can't even remember now what they would say, but it used to be Usher. They wanted to grow up and be the next Usher, or they wanted to grow up and be the next Michael Jordan, right? These were their heroes. These were people that they could see really making it. Denzel Washington, they'd like to be Denzel. But for many kids, those goals are out of reach. And they're out of reach because they don't have those talents and abilities. That's not the thing that distinguishes them from everyone else. So what they see around them too often are people who are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Or they're seeing people who've given up on getting jobs because they were incarcerated and they're having difficulty finding work because people don't like to hire ex-felons. It's right on the application. They'll see people who have African-American names who have trouble getting hired because they're filtered out at the early stage of hiring because people say, oh, well, I don't want to hire somebody that sounds like that. Now, that's some of the information that's being fed to them. When I talk to African-American adults, they talk about things that they learned as children that were different from the messages that I got as a child. So one of the things that I got was, you can do anything you want as long as you work hard enough. That was a message I got from my parents, and I believed it. African-American kids get a different message. The message they often hear is, you are going to have to work twice as hard as a white person to get the same things. That's the message. I had the message when I looked around in the world, there were lots of models of success who looked like me. I saw them everywhere. When Black people look around for models of success, it's the exception rather than the rule, what they see, unless it's in these areas where they don't have the same talents and abilities. I was taught that police are my friends, that they protect me, that if I ever got in trouble, go find a police officer, they'll help me. Black people are taught something different, and they see evidence of it all around them. And that's that Black people they're told, stay away from police, they'll kill you. And I know that not all Black people, I know not all police kill people. I know that. I know it doesn't happen a lot. But what I do know is the statistic that Black people are 2.8 times more likely to be killed in police custody than a white person. Black people know that statistic too. They know the names of the people who have been killed unnecessarily by Black people, unarmed people, shot in the back, in a chokehold, who lose their lives for something very small. There was, I'm going to look at my notes to see if I can get these people. Just in 2014, there was Dontre Hamilton, who was a paranoid schizophrenic, not doing anything wrong. Police were called by the Starbucks. He struggled and he was shot and killed. Eric Garner was selling loose cigarettes on a street corner. The police tried to arrest him, brought him to the ground, put him in a chokehold, and he died. John Crawford, I don't know if you remember this story. John Crawford III was a father in a Kmart or Walmart who bought a BB gun. Someone in the store called the police about a man with a gun. Police came and shot him dead in the store. So now it becomes illegal to hold a BB gun, to buy a BB gun in a store. Michael Brown from Ferguson, Missouri, he was killed by police. No charges were ever filed. There was no justice. And I could go on, but I'll talk about 2020 because that was 2014. And not to say there weren't other people in between. 2020, you have Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging and shot by two people. You have Breonna Taylor, who was killed in her home because police had a no-knock warrant and went to the wrong house, thinking they were making a drug arrest, and her boyfriend shot, thinking they were being robbed or broken into, and the police opened fire and shot her 8 times in her bed. Then there was George Floyd. We all know about George Floyd. And since George Floyd, there have been other instances. So it's been easy for white people not to notice these things because, first of all, until recently, we didn't have video of them. Now we have video, so it's not easy to just discount these events. But Black people have been aware of this for a very long time, so they have different knowledge in their knowledge filters. And then they develop different values. And so sometimes my values, a white person's values, there's a path to success for me. There's an expectation I will succeed, and I'm going to be protected along the way. Whereas a Black person develops the values that success will be a burden. I'm not an athlete or an entertainer. What path is left for me? And I'm hunted. The other thing that I think distinguishes Black and white people is our cultures. White people have an incredibly individualistic culture. We look at ourselves as individuals and what's good for us. Black people tend to look at culture collectivistically. They come from a collectivistic culture. So what happens to one of them happens to all of them. They feel loss differently than perhaps we would. So I was going to share, I know I'm running out of time, I was going to share some instances where I experienced racism when I was with a Black person. I was able to see it firsthand. I don't have time to do that. But one instance I'll share that came out of a diversity training. There was a white woman in my training who said when she was a kid, she used to shop with her Black friend because when they went into stores, the store clerks followed the Black girl and the white girl was able to steal because it was predictable that the clerks would follow the white kid or the Black kid around. I also went through a checkout line with a friend of mine, a Black friend, Sylvester it was, and I bought some things and he bought some things. We both paid with credit cards. I was given my merchandise and he was asked for ID. And when I asked the woman, why did you ask him for ID and you didn't ask me? And she had no answer, because I think the only answer was that he was Black. So those are instances of privilege. I don't have to show my ID. I don't have to defend myself. If I say to a police officer, this is what happened, they tend to believe me. If my Black friend was with me and said the same thing, they tend to be disbelieved. And I don't think that people realize that they're racist. And I'm not even saying individually racist. Most of the people in the world, other than white supremacists in our country, not the world, would say they're not racist. They treat people the same. Some even say they're colorblind. But saying you're colorblind is yet another example of privilege, because we can be colorblind. We can say, I don't see skin color. But what that says is you can then maintain your white superiority by saying, I'm one of the good guys. I don't do that. I also think it tells Black people that their suffering and what they've been through doesn't matter. Their Black skin has no distinction from ours. We all see color, or we wouldn't have the need to say, I don't see color. So I want to say that Black Lives Matters is not about calling out individual people, even individual police officers, as racist. People tend to get defensive because they think I'm being called a racist. I had a conversation with a person very close to me who believes, he said, I watched the video of George Floyd and I believe he was straight up murdered. I'm not a racist. I have very good friends who are African American. I treat everyone the same. And he believes that. But to get behind Black Lives Matters, he would have to admit that he's been part of a racist system and has benefited because of that. Black Lives Matters isn't about calling out people as racist. It's about looking at the inequities there are in our system. Black people have more trouble getting mortgages. Black people have a harder time being admitted to college. Black people are over-policed. They sit in jails longer because they're in lower socioeconomic areas and can't afford bail. That when they are tried with a white person who committed the same offense, they get longer sentencing. White people might get probation. They're on death row more. And recently I saw the statistic that 1 in 9 people on death row have been deemed innocent based on DNA. And most of the people sitting on death row are African American. So I think for me, I'm trying to help white people understand what's happening in Black people's worlds. Someone said to me, well, they should band together and they should build their own economy. Guess what? They did that in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They had what was called Black Wall Street, very successful African American community. And you know what happened? Mm-hmm. White people went in and killed them, burned things down, and sent them into the night running for their lives. They had some political clout in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's come out now. It's been hidden. You can find it in their library, but they've been told not to let anyone look. It's about a time when people systematically, they had a period of time when white people went in and killed Black people. They killed Black people who were in the government, because they had a good bit of African American representation in the state legislative, and they killed them or they ran them out of town. So these happened in the early 1900s. It's not, and I think Oklahoma City was 1898. It's been a long time, but Black people have tried to do the things that we've been saying they should do. I think it's harder when you're in this oppressive system. It's harder when your whole life you've seen these inequities and come to believe that you are less than. If you've seen the studies of dolls, they've been replicated 2 or 3 times with white kids and Black kids looking at dolls, and both groups prefer the white dolls and say they're prettier, because that's what the messages we've been giving unconsciously. We don't even know we're doing it. But I feel that, yes, individually, Black people are doing the best they can. That's why they're protesting. I think white people have, if they have a feeling, a desire to try to right these wrongs, we need to look at the system. It's like lead management now. We're talking about people can't function in a broken system. They can't function very well. So if 90% of the problems are systemic problems, we need to look at the system. And the last thing I want to say, it's just the difference between responsibility and responsibility. We are not responsible for slavery. We didn't create it. We didn't participate in it. We're not responsible for Tulsa, Oklahoma. We weren't even alive then. We are responsible for anything we do or anything we think that causes us to believe that Black people are less than white people. We are all response-able, Black and white. We are response-able, meaning we can respond if we choose to. And if we don't choose to respond, that's a choice too. And we are all responsible for the choices that we make. So difference between responsibility and response-able. My choice is to be response-able in the way that I'm being response-able. You don't have to like it. You don't have to applaud my efforts, but I challenge everyone to be response-able in the way that they can be, to do what they believe is right. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, all right, Kim, that was very, very insightful, very thoughtful.
Thanks, Mona.
And giving some good examples even of whenever you were with diversity and the white children and the Black children were being followed and the white child did the
feeding.
Was it brought to the attention? I mean, was that a legitimate thing or?
Well, I believe her. It was just her, but I also know that I have been in stores with Black people as adults who've been followed around a store. You know, not me. I don't get followed around a store. A clerk will come to me and say, "Can I help you?" And I'll say, "No, I'm just looking." And then they go on their way. But I've been with people who say, "I'm just looking," and the clerk just stands there and folds her hands across her arms and just watches. I mean,
Right.
it happens. I've seen it happen. And some people haven't seen it because they're not in the community with white people, or I'm sorry, with Black people. So they don't get those opportunities. It's why I think I'm in a unique position to actually talk about this, because I've seen it. And I've also heard about it from the Black people in my classes. And I tend to believe when people tell me that that's their personal experience. I don't try to argue them out of their personal experiences or defend white people against their personal experiences. I listen and I believe their experience because it's 100% valid for them. It's their experience. I don't get to say that that's not true or that didn't happen. That's their experience. And I'll repeat it as someone's experience. I don't know if it's true or not. I wasn't there.
Right. So it's being, yeah. And then the responsibility and being able to respond in a positive way. Do you have any more you want to add to that?
Oh, Mona, I could add so much to that.
Is that a loaded question?
I could add so much to that. I think it's just my way of trying to help people understand Black Lives Matter, the movement. They are not being accused of racism. They may hear that word thrown around because there is unconscious and systemic racism. Harvard University did some implicit bias inventories with people around race and discovered that the majority of people who took it, Black and white people, were biased against Black people. There's a self-hatred that develops when you have been in an environment that is constantly telling you you're not as good as the majority of people in the country. I can only imagine what that would feel like when you reach out to do something and your legitimate efforts are blocked because of the color of your skin. And maybe it isn't because of the color of your skin. Maybe it's something else, but it happens so often for Black people. And given the knowledge that they've accumulated, they see it differently than we might see it. I've been with Black people who called out something as racism, and from my perspective, with my knowledge and my values, I didn't see it that way. But I have to remember that my perception is valid for me, but their perception is also valid for them. And so I try to accept what they're telling me and understand, because I know what my perspective is. I've lived it my whole life. I'm 100% aware of that. I'm not 100% aware of people of color and what they've lived through. So by being willing to listen and to hear, and I know that there are successful people of color who will call out Black Lives Matter and say, and that's their responsibility. They're responding with their ability to say, that's not true. I'm not affected by racism. Racism was over. We don't have racism anymore. For them, that's true. That is their experience. I'm not calling them out as liars. I'm not believing that their experience isn't true or accurate. I just don't think it's the experience of the vast majority of people of color in our country. But that's my opinion, right? It's only my opinion. And
so it's becoming aware.
I think it's awareness. I think it's first listening, and listening to understand, and then curating the information to decide what you're going to believe, what you're not going to believe, what you think is right, what you think is true, doing your own research. I have a book I would highly recommend. It's called White Fragility. And that's a book that helps white people understand why we cling so much to this "I'm not racist" and "I'm colorblind" kind of rhetoric. We need to look at why that's offensive to Black people, instead of us getting defensive about their defensiveness or offensiveness. Instead of being defensive, I would love to see white people get curious and say, help me understand. I didn't understand why all lives matter was difficult for people, because I truly believe all lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
I even said it once on Facebook, but I stopped saying it because I now understand better what the movement is about. The movement is saying, yes, all lives matter. All lives are important. But until we can legitimately and honestly say Black lives matter, saying all lives matter is a lie. All lives don't matter until Black lives matter. Yeah. So that's my understanding of the Black Lives Movement. That's why I don't say all lives matter anymore, because I've listened and I understand. The whole thing, oh gosh, I could go on about Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's, but I don't want to go there, because I think that also detracts from the mission. One other thing, you asked me if I had more to say, Mona, you opened this up. One more thing I want to say is, I hear a lot from white people who get a little defensive about this systemic racism. And they've said to me, what about Black on Black crime? What about Black abortions of Black children? How can you say Black Lives Matter when you're aborting babies and when you're killing each other? And I want to say that those are issues that the Black community addresses a lot. I've been to protests in Chicago on Stop the Violence. There's a lot of killing that goes on in Chicago. It's mostly gang related. And my belief is that a lot of gangs come from low socioeconomic status, come from absent fathers in the home, and we can ask about why are fathers absent from the home. Some people think it's a lack of morals, it's, that kind of thing. I think it has a lot to do with the culture, and how if Black people are being taken off the street for crimes that they didn't commit, or petty crimes like selling loose cigarettes, fathers aren't going to be in the homes. And then they get, another thing, let me go back and say, another resource I'd love for people to watch is 13 on Netflix. It's about the 13th Amendment. And it shares a lot of information about what happened after Black people were freed from slavery and given the right to vote, what some of the inequities still are, so you can see for yourself. Now you have to decide whether you believe that or you don't believe that. And I'm sure you could find other places, depends on, there is a confirmation bias, right? We're looking for information that confirms what we already believe. And while we do that, we are not curious or open to other opinions and information. I am guilty of confirmation bias. We all are. I feel best when I'm with people who think like I do, so I can get confirmation. I feel best when I find information that supports my belief. But because of the internet and all the information that's out there, anyone can find confirmation for what they believe. And so I ask that people be curious and open to at least explore information that shakes the foundation of what you believe.
Yeah.
It's scary, but I think it's worth it.
Well, thank you again so much. And while we're talking about this, I just think about the quantum theory and the fact that everything is matter. Everything is matter. We can't even see it. It's all, you know, in the room where you are. There's things you can't see, but it's part of matter. And everything matters. And what a disservice we do when we do not recognize how much validity even the smallest thing has. And that all lives do matter, but especially those that have been disavowed for so long.
Thank you, Mona.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. I'm going to close the, say goodbye to those that are watching later. And those of you that are here, we'll open the, as soon as I turn it off, we will open the airways, and you're willing to make, or you're welcome to make comments or ask questions of Kim for just a few more minutes. So thank you for being here. This has been a product from the Glasser Institute for Choice Theory, and trust that you will be back with us. In the meantime, have a great day, a great week, and good mental health. Blessings.
Thank you.
And it is stopped.